welcome to this week's episode of Guns Explained. I'm your host, Cameron Porter. We are here in a one-of-a-kind store called Smith & Edwards. Here, we are going to be joined by Sheriff Terry Thompson of Weber County and Mike Voss, the sporting goods manager here at Smith & Edwards. They're going to be helping us talk about the parts of a firearm and the basic parts of a cartridge or a round of ammunition. So, Sheriff and Mike, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.
So what are we gonna start with first?
If we take a look at this here, I've got my .40 caliber, I've got just a couple of dummy rounds, and I fed them into this magazine. So let me talk just a little bit about the components involved in those handguns and various firearms first. If we look at these, and we look at the rifle, we look at the shotgun, we look at the lever, the pump, they look different, right? And so sometimes we look at one and feel comfortable and not so comfortable with the other. If we look at this revolver, for example, most of us look at a revolver and think, you know, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I kind of know how that works. That looks like something I can handle. But what sometimes happens is we look at this semi-automatic and go, that looks a little bit complicated. I'm not sure how that works. You know, it's a little bit, a little bit different for people looking at semi-auto. So my message to your viewers is this. When you look at a firearm, they have three primary components: a barrel, a frame, and an action. All firearms have those three components. If you're missing one of them, it's a cool looking paperweight.
Makes sense.
So there are other components, obviously, in how they work, but the reality of it is those are your three primary components. So if we look at this revolver versus this semi-automatic, the reason they look a little bit different, and maybe this is a little more complicated really, is in how we feed them. So if we look at this revolver, we call this a revolver because it has a revolving cylinder. That's how we feed it. So we feed our ammunition into that cylinder, we close that cylinder, and then we manually rotate to the next round. That's how we make it work. That's how we feed it. That's why it functions differently. When we look at this semi-automatic and kind of take a look at that, again, we feed this differently, and that's why it looks a little more complicated. We don't have that rotating cylinder. What we have is what people often call a clip, and this is not a clip. This is a magazine. That's the correct nomenclature for like anal instructors, right? This is a magazine, and that's how we feed it. So we have a couple of our little pink dummy rounds in here to help us understand how that works. So I've got my cartridges we talked about. I've loaded my rounds in this magazine. I'll feed them into the grip of this semi-auto, allow the slide to close, and now we have a dummy round, or which would be on the range, a live round loaded in the chamber. We're ready to go. So if I fire that, pull that trigger, bang, it'll go. Fire, extract, eject, pick up the next round and feed it. And then all I have to do is pull the trigger again. Bang, 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 until I'm done and we lock open. So that's how a semi-automatic works, with those kind of components, feeding it with that magazine. That's why they look different.
So the term chamber.
Yes.
On a firearm such as this, it's pretty easy to identify that it's right there. That's
Yes.
where the round sits.
Yep.
When it's when it's next in line, I guess, to be shot.
Exactly.
So if it's in the chamber when you pull the trigger, it's going to be fired.
That's exactly right. I brought my buddy Mike here today to join us, and he's going to go over long guns, shotguns, and rifles for us.
That'd be great.
So
yeah.
we get to listen to the resident expert now.
Absolutely.
First of all, as good as you did, when you retire, Sheriff, I want to hire you, okay?
There you go.
I think you did a really nice
I got
job.
something lined up.
You're ready to go. So, as we go into long guns, we have a bolt action Browning rifle here with a scope on top of that. And so you've got a receiver here. Your chamber would be inside here where the cartridge rests when it fires. The action of this is going to be a bolt action. So we're going to raise that, and that's where your cartridge will eject. And then from the magazine below, rather than being in the grip, it's just directly below. That's where you'll load your cartridges. And then each round would push forward and into the chamber there. So as you fire it, it would extract, spent cartridge case would come out, and the next one would pop up ready to go so you could bolt action that in. And then I'm going to jump from there. I'm going to reach across and grab the lever action, since we were talking about the Old West and whatnot. Here you've got a lever action 22, and that's what it does. That lever runs down and runs forward. It also has a hammer like we talked about.
And that particular one, Mike isn't telling you, is actually going home with me today. That's what I'm thinking. So Mike and I have just working something out here, Cameron.
You could really not work here, because then you'd never take money home.
I'd never get a check. It just wouldn't happen.
You just got to pace yourself. So moving on to another rifle action. So we had the semi-automatic handguns, and now we got a semi-automatic rifle. A lot of you will call this an AR-15. Here's a very high quality one with a very nice rail bipod. We have an optic on top of it. But here again, we are magazine fed. Cartridges are loaded through the magazine, and then they will be introduced into the receiver of the rifle like that. Don't be confused, it's not a machine gun. It just fires every time we press the trigger, just like a handgun does.
Sure, semi-automatic.
Semi-automatic, yep.
So a couple questions for you, shifting gears just a little bit. Going back to the basics. This is a scope, right?
It is.
Is this also a scope?
This is a red dot optic. This does have magnification,
Okay.
only 3 power. This is variable. This particular one is from 4 power to 12 power. A lot of times you'll see an optic like this on an AR type rifle that is a 1 power. And what that gives you is very wide field of view, so you have quick acquisition. As you increase your magnification, your field of view will narrow. And so if you're targeting or making a long shot, you can turn your magnification up and make that long shot. Whereas if you need a quick acquisition rifle, a 3 power or a 1 power gives you a wider view so you can access your target.
So what does it mean when someone says iron sights?
Iron sights would be like on our Old West rifle. And that would be, original sights would be made of steel and they were called iron sights, but you have your ability to adjust that up and down. Sorry, I was kind of in the way there. Up and down for your elevation, and you can drift it side to side in its dovetail or the cut in the metal. And so it's an iron sight, steel front and back, so that's what you're lining up.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And so no one calls that in a handgun, but the handguns we looked at had iron sights also.
Okay,
but
yeah,
they'll
I can
more
see.
refer
Got
to
that.
that in a rifle. But those are just metal sights.
Okay, so that's if you're not
That's what-
using a scope, that's how you're going to aim. Is
Correct.
and you've got your rear sight and your front sight. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So what part of the gun is the stock?
The stock is going to be right here. This happens to be a synthetic stock, but it's what houses our receiver, our action,
Okay.
okay, and our chamber and our barrel. So that holds that. So that is.
So what about the term pistol grip? I've heard that term before.
Pistol grip. Mike, take it away.
Well, right back there where we started with the shotgun.
Uh-huh.
Technically, on the firearm, that is the pistol grip area.
Okay.
In that type of stock, and coming over here to the bolt action, still you have the pistol grip area. It's where you're gripping the rifle, and they call it a pistol grip. On
Okay.
an AR type rifle, that's going to, see, that's not built into the contour of the stock. That sticks down. And so that is the pistol grip that we're going to grab right there.
We discussed in a previous episode a little bit about the 1994 assault weapons ban, and one of the, I guess, accessories or features that a gun could have that makes it classified as an assault weapon is a pistol grip.
Pistol grip. And so that's what they were trying to say. I don't think those who just drafted that legislation, in total respect, really knew gun terminology very well. And so they figured that a gun with a pistol grip meant it was this kind of gun and it was bad. So they said if you didn't have that, then they put full stocks on these guns. So it really didn't change the operation, the function, the action
Sure.
of the gun. It just changed how we gripped it.
Sure.
So they figured that the pistol grip was something, if they eliminated that it eliminated the style of weapon, which it did not.
Interesting.
So
Okay, well that makes
I
sense.
didn't want to step on anyone's toes or anything. I think
No,
that
absolutely.
just was the thinking.
Well, going on that note, kind of, what about suppressors? Or they were also in the 1994 weapons ban. Suppressors or flash suppressors, I think they might be called.
Flash hiders were part of that
Flash
ban.
hiders.
So
Okay, sure.
you've got a flash hider right there.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they call that a bird cage in that style. And that disperses the blast or the light that comes out when you fire it. And so it does help a little bit in the recoil, but it disperses that light. So if you were in a military situation, did not want to give away your position, that dispersed that and didn't give away your position as badly as just the muzzle flash, which is quite large.
I see. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
they'll call it a flash hider. Sometimes you hear that called.
Sure.
We've got some long range rifles there. I'll walk over behind, and just to help you understand, that was a flash hider. This style is called a muzzle brake, and as you can see, it's multi-ported, and that's pushing the gases sidewards so they don't come back, so that the muzzle doesn't rise. And also then you have here a suppressor, and sometimes we'll mix that term too. A suppressor takes background checks and a special ATF stamp and time to possess. So those are not in the United States over the counter. In Europe, they're over the counter. It's common.
Huh.
And that will reduce your